I want to welcome the GMs and the wives, the godly men and the warm, inviting, feminine, empathetic women out there. Today's video topic, I want to discuss how old friends becoming enemies can actually be a sign of growth. And for those that are just joining, my name is Thaddeus, and this is the Regal Change YouTube channel. And really, the reason that you might be experiencing some of these old friends or acquaintances that you've known for years, or they're from your hometown, suddenly they're becoming people that are against you. They're crabs in a bucket. They are not wanting to see you succeed. They've always said that they want to be there for you and they want to see the best in you, but yet when you actually become that person, well, all of a sudden it's not okay. All of a sudden they want you to get the hell back here. What's that all about? Well, some of these people might be revealing to you that they were never really there to begin with. They were never with you from the beginning. You were alone, or you were with other people and you didn't realize it. And the good thing about old friends being exposed as enemies is now you get to live a life that is more authentic. You get to live a life that is more pure. You get to live a life that is more self-realized and experienced, because now you're not around people that are faking it with you just to feel like they're not the miserable pieces of crap that they are. And perhaps not all of these people that were your old friends are bad people. You know, some of them are probably just not quite there. They just don't have the drive that you do, or they're not quite as ambitious as you, and they do not have the spiritual understanding and wisdom that is required to roll with you, let's say. So they're not necessarily bad people, but they're not really enemies either. Sometimes you still need to leave these people behind, and it's not necessarily because you want to and you don't want to see them with you, but it's more of the fact that you've got places to be and things to do that are beyond that which you're doing and being with these people. And if they really are decent people, they're going to understand, and they may not like it, but they're going to understand. Whereas the people that are your enemies, that were your old friends or acquaintances or the hometown people, and now they are utterly against you, oh boy. You know, there was a time when I never thought that this person who I had known for most of my life, I don't even remember a day that I didn't know this person. When he finally showed me who he was, and really he was showing me all along, I just chose not to see it because I had known him for so long. You know, like I had known these people, him specifically, and his family even as well. I'd known them for so long that it was never really something that I was I was never against him. I was never really with him though either. We had a lot of differentiating opinions and understandings, but at the time my parents and their parents were pretty good friends, and we just kind of met through them in many ways. But the reality of the situation was that we were just too different. And so by the time we grew up, and we had known each other for a long time, like decades, okay? So, well, okay, not decades, but probably a decade and a half by the time I realized that these people were no longer okay for me to be around. And so when I realized this, it really shook me to my core, because not only would I be going against the wishes of him and his family, but also my own, because I'd be severing some kind of bond that we've had for a decade and a half. And I didn't really want to, but at the same time, with everything going on with my family at the time, I just didn't really want to be around these kinds of people anymore. I didn't want to be around people that were just settling for the basic stuff. I had in my heart something that was much more than that. And I was surrounded by people that wanted me to be average. It was so annoying. It was so annoying. And it's not because they were necessarily bad people. This guy that I'm talking about, and his family, it's not necessarily because they're bad people. It's just we didn't align on things anymore. And I don't really see the point in needing to keep connections with people that we're not really building with, because otherwise you're just stagnant or going backwards. And I would say in many cases, stagnation is worse than failure. The reason being is because at least if you're at least if you're failing, you're trying something. Whereas in stagnation, you're not even moving. And it's better to move and fail to move than it is to not move at all. But ultimately, you want to be the person that is not making these kinds of mistakes. And fortunately for me, I caught these mistakes that these other people were making early on enough to where I didn't have to really rely on these other people to fulfill me, like so many other people do in this world. So many people look to other people to fulfill them. And that's where the whole saying, misery loves company, comes from, right? But it's also because these people are just not awake. They're not following Christ, truly. They might even say that they're Christian or claim that they're Christian or any other religion. But they're not really following, a lot of the times, what they're actually preaching. And that's one of the ways in which I'm very much so different from many people. It's like I've felt as if I've been an outsider my whole life, and yet I can get along with anybody. I can get along with almost anyone that I come in contact with if I really wanted to. I'm a very kind, cordial man. Like, I don't really have a lot of beef with anybody. I don't have any hate with anybody. However, if you start to test me, and you test me a little bit too much, oh yeah, then we're fucking enemies. And you better believe that I am going to see you as an enemy. And this is what's crazy, is some of the people that are around you already, these are not even old friends. These are just maybe people that are around you. You can see and feel as if there are enemies in your line of vision. There are enemies walking among you in many ways, shapes, and forms. A lot of these temptations out here are forms or archetypes of enemies. And when I say that, I mean not just for males, but also for females. Many of people of the opposite gender that we're coming into contact with are temptations to steer away from righteousness. And it takes a lot more discipline on the woman's part, I think, than a man in some ways, to actually shield herself and stay disciplined enough to not be a hoe. Whereas a man, he's not really a hoe, he's the hoe creator, which isn't anything better, but there is a distinction there that I think is important to make. And so you have people that are just temptations of going backwards, of failing. And if you're not careful, some of the old people that are in your life, whether it's an old relationship or whatever, family, it could be anybody. There are people that are going to use your closeness. I was going to say intimacy, but you can't really have that with family. And if you do, you should probably get help. But the closeness that you share can sometimes be used as a weapon of remorse and bitterness in attempting to bring you back to what you once were. And this is not anything that is particularly new under the sun, but it is likely that if you have people like this that are trying to bring you back to a mode of being in which doesn't allow you to grow in the most optimal way that you know how. Because guess what? I guarantee you there are already ways of being and growth that you could be doing right now, but you're not. And it's not necessarily because you don't want to, perhaps. It's that you don't even know what you don't know about how to grow in certain ways. And so this is one of the reasons why I think it's so important for everybody to meditate and to stay close to their true inner being, because it reveals to you your intuitions and instincts in a way that you might not understand or be able to comprehend otherwise. It's not necessarily to empty yourself out. It's to notice what it's like to be who you are, right? So when you are on the path of growth, there are going to be some kind of soul ties, whether they're positive or negative, that you're going to have to really examine whether or not you need to let go. Even if they're positive people per se, but they're not a net positive in what you're trying to do and build, they need to go. If somebody, this is not to say that if somebody isn't giving you value, you just kick them to the curb, because that's not always how life works. But if you're just not even capable of building with someone, then yeah, they need to be removed from your life, as tough as it may be. Because you don't necessarily want to kick someone to the curb because they're not doing enough. You can encourage them. You can still work with them. Perhaps it's not necessarily the ideal situation, sure. But if you can work with someone, I mean, that's a lot. That says a lot about the person and the individual, that they're actually not trying to destroy you. Because there's a lot of people from your hometown or whatever, especially if you come from a town like myself. I wasn't necessarily raised in the ghetto, okay? I wasn't necessarily raised in the best environment either, but we did see some crazy stuff growing up. And so I was under the impression that growing up, I was able to notice certain patterns of behavior with other people and whether or not they're going to be a direct threat. I was always in survival mode, though. That was not necessarily the best state of mind or physiology to be in, but I was on whether or not this person is going to be a direct threat. The problem with some people is that they're not necessarily direct threats, but covert threats. And what do I mean by this? It means that they will intentionally try to sabotage your life and then act as if they're going to be the rescuers. It's a complete mind craziness game. It's just a mind game altogether. And any kind of sign or indication that you're working with someone like that, or you're being around someone like that, You need to carefully examine how to interact with this person so that you can still grow. Because it's very lethal out here sometimes. It's a very treacherous place in the world. It can be cold-blooded. Really cold. And if you're not careful and if you're not analyzing the situation properly, you're going to get used and tossed to the side. Whether you're male or female or whatever, in whatever kind of situation, it doesn't even matter. If you allow yourself to be under the authority of somebody else's spirit, whether for good or for evil, and commit yourself to their spirit, and you haven't understood or vetted the spirit enough to whether or not this person's actually going to be worth your time and worth your energy to allow your spirit to be poured back into them as a giver and as someone that is willing to be learned. Is that going to be a proper way of phrasing that? Anyway, you guys see what I'm saying. Then you need to be very mindful of how you navigate that terrain so that you do not come into contact with people that are going to steal your life essence, because that's really what they're going to be doing. So be careful with how you vet people to allow them into your life, and understand that a lot of the people from your hometown or from your past, they might not even be the best suited for your mission. And this is not to say you need to just completely cut them off either. You can just keep them at an arm's length. And that's what I tried to do with this friend of mine that I was referring to at the time. I tried to keep him at arm's length, but over time it just went to show that they're just not with me. They're going to try to covertly control the situation, and I'm not about that. Not in the slightest. So with that being said, I hope this message was useful and insightful. And until next time, peace be with you.